Welcome to Potluck and Poison Ivy, where we bring stories to the table, Southern style. We're live at the Joint in the Argenta Arts District of North Little Rock, Arkansas, and I'm your host tonight, John Godin. Tonight, we're thrilled to bring you an Arkansas-grown mountain music and storytelling family, including Melissa Toma and Ron Hughes, to share their stories, music and good old-fashioned harmony, just like hanging out on the front porch on a Saturday night. We're going to kick off the evening with music, so please give a warm welcome to the Friends and Family Band.
Aren't you supposed to do this when you come out? Hello, North Little Rock.
Our musicians tonight are Mark Baer, banjo and guitar picker from Pryor, Oklahoma. Rex Baer, mandolin player from Maumelle. Ron Hughes, Ron's a guitar, banjo, fiddle, and bass player, also lead singer for the Greasy Greens. And Johnny Scroggins, the legend.
Absolutely.
Johnny's a bass-playing prodigy who's played with the likes for 2.5 years with Leon Russell, Jerry Lee Lewis, and he's a retired jet pilot on the side. And of course, my dear friend, Melissa Toma, she provides harmony, having sung everything in Central Arkansas from bluegrass to opera. Ladies and gentlemen, the Friends and the Family Band.
All right, let's kick this off. If you're friends or if you're family, that means you're part of the band. So start singing. I believe that covers everybody here. You're either friends or family. All right.
1, 2, 3. Well, it's been 10 long years since I left my home in the holler where I was born, where the cool fall night made the wood fire smoke rise and the fox hunter blows his horn. Well, I fell in love with a girl from the town, and I hoped her love would be true. Then ran away to Charlottesville and worked in a sawmill or two. What have they done to the old home place? Why did they tear down? And why did I leave my plow in the field and look for a job in the town? Yeah, that girl, she ran off with somebody else, and the taverns, they took my pay. Now here I stand where the old home once stood before they took it away. Now them geese fly south and the wind blows cold, and I stand here hanging my head. I've lost my love, I've lost my own home, and now I wish that I was dead. What have they done to the old home place? Why did they tear it down? And why did I leave
Tonight's going to be about looking back. Now, Ram Dass says it's okay to look back, but don't stare. Oh, we're going to try not to stare, but... As I look at this valley down below, it was green just as far as I could see. My memory returned, how my heart yearned for you and the way things used to be. High on the mountaintop, standing all alone, wondering where the years of my life have flown. High on the mountaintop, wind blowing free, wondering if you ever think of me. Yeah, I wonder if you ever think of me, or is time blotted out of your memory? I listen to the breeze softly in the trees. I'll always cherish what you meant to me. High on the mountaintop, standing all alone, wondering where the years of my life have flown. High on the mountaintop, wind blowing free, wondering if you ever think of me. Yeah, I wonder if you ever think of me, or is time blotted out your memory? I listen to the breeze softly through the trees. I'll always cherish what you meant to me. High on the mountaintop, standing all alone, wondering where the years of my life have flown. High on the mountaintop, wind blowing free, thinking about the way things used to be. Yeah, and I wonder if you ever think of me. I mean, I think about you all the time, you know, and there's forward.
All right, it's time to get to our storytellers. Native Arkansan Melissa Toma has been actively involved in the community since she and husband Martin moved to Central Arkansas in 1983 and founded Toma Toma. Her firm has provided over $1.5 million in pro bono support to nonprofits across this state. Melissa has been singing since she can remember and has performed almost every genre of music, from bluegrass to oratorio. When she shares stories about her mountain family, she gets constant urging to take these stories on the road. Tonight is her first attempt at doing that. Please help me welcome my friend Melissa Toma.
Oh my goodness, thank you all so much for letting me be here. I tell you what, I don't know if I'm a storyteller. My family would probably call me an exaggerator. At any rate, the stories I'm sharing tonight are true. And the photos that you saw while you were enjoying dinner are from my family. So everything is true, and I'm not exaggerating. All right. My story begins in the big bend of the Washita River on a stretch of ground that runs between Mount Ida and Pencil Bluff, Arkansas. Y'all see it over there? That's a big bend. Now, if you travel those green hills over Goss Road, off the bridge overlooking the river, down the hill into Hainted Holler, and up over the crest of Goss Mountain, you'll come to a more than modest white house perched on a high point in the landscape. Now, this home is my ancestral legacy. Originally, it was a double dog trot cabin. That is a log house with 2 rooms and a central breezeway running through it. And this is the home where my paternal grandmother was born. You see, I like to say that I am an Arkansas aristocrat. I am a hillbilly, to be exact, and this is my elegy. Although I really believe that you'll agree that my story goes a little bit differently than J.D. Vance's version that's going around the book clubs right now. Now, my grandmother's name was Panty Taylor. Not kidding, Panty. And to make matters even better, she fell in love with and married Herbert Shortie Bear. So they were Panty and Shortie Bear. Yeah, and my family has a twisted sense of humor because they had a first cousin named Harry Peter Bear. That's true. It's true. Now, Panty always swore that back in the day, ladies' dedicates were known as bloomers. Her daddy just thought that Panty was a beautiful name. And I have to say, I think this guy would have made a great product namer because he named another one of his daughters Chlorine. That's true. Now, my Granny Panty was a pistol. She was a powerful personality. At 4'11", she towered over all of us, using her boundless energy to turn out amazing Sunday dinners. She tended over 1.5 acres of garden. She whipped up beautiful clothes, and she whipped up a dress or two for you while she was at it. She cared perfectly for my grandpa, Shorty, who had suffered a stroke that left him unable to walk. And then she would just pop on a pair of high heels and head to her paying job down at the shoe store on Main Street in Rogers, Arkansas. And there she is. Now, she had a sunbeam smile. She had a legendary poker face because she always looked really pleased with her hand. And she had sparkling, intelligent eyes. As a matter of fact, she remains the smartest woman I have ever known, even though she only had a 6th grade education. Nonetheless, she read voraciously, she subscribed to multiple newspapers, and not only knew what was going on in the world, but she had an informed opinion about it. She was a yellow dog Democrat. Honey, she loved Bill Clinton. As a matter of fact, when she died peacefully in her bed, in her sleep at the age of 93, they found her absentee ballot under her pillow, all filled out with Bill's name checked off. And so they went ahead and sent it. And that is real absentee voting, if you ask me. So, now, Panty was the youngest in her family, and being spunky and curly-headed and smart, my great-aunts all agreed she was really quite spoiled. She was a natural entertainer and storyteller and was usually the center of attention. What she liked to do most of all was make and have fun. That woman loved to party. She did everything from entertaining the Masonic Sunshine Girls to creating elaborate Christmas celebrations and family feasts to camping down by the river and staying up all night fishing. no one was having more fun or laughing louder than Granny Panny Bear. Panny and her three sisters, Chlorine, but we called her Chlora, Winnie and Lou, were born and raised in that little log cabin in the Big Bend of the Ouachita River. And when Granny Panny and her sisters were young, there were usually about 18 people living in that little house at any given time. And right up there, that is Panny's mom and dad. That's Ma and Pa Taylor. And then there were the four girls, and then there were various and sundry hired hands who lived there right with them and worked the cotton and the crops, and a passel of other children who Panny referred to as the haves and the steps. Now, these were kids whose mothers had died in childbirth, and back in those days, the newly widowed husbands often just couldn't take care of a newborn infant and work the farm and feed the rest of the family. And so Grandma Taylor often took them in and sometimes nursed the tiny preemies in a wooden shoebox in the warming drawer of the wood stove, kind of like a little incubator. And some of those haves and steps became really a vibrant part of our lives as children, and they were every bit the great aunt or uncle as our blood relatives. Now, the Taylor girls had a very unique childhood. Since my great-grandpa Taylor had no boys of his own, the girls were sent to the field to pick cotton right beside his field hands. And in this picture here, you're going to see the four Taylor girls. So they've got the cotton sacks on, and my Granny Panny is the cute, spoiled little one in the white dress that is clearly not going to pick cotton with her foot on the lunch bucket, right? And the girl and boy kind of in the middle are some of the haves and the steps. Now, if they weren't in the field, then they were cooking and cleaning for this small army of 18 or more people, or tending the garden and putting up food. And they all of them became superb cooks and just master gardeners. There was only one problem. They really only knew how to cook for 18. And so it really didn't matter if there were 4 of you at the dinner table. 36 rolls were risen, pinched off, baked, and served. And we went home with a stomachache a lot. Saying. Now, far from being a brutal environment, life on the farm was fun, according to Granny Panny. And adventure waited around every corner. There was laughter and prank playing, and always music in that house. Granny Panny said her first memory was of her Uncle Homer singing Heavenly Sunlight to her by the fireplace at night. And as poor as they were, they actually had a pump organ in that house, and just like Meg, Amy, Beth, and Joe from Little Women, they gathered to sing before bedtime every single night. Now, Grandpa Taylor, Granny Panny's daddy, had a huge sense of humor and came up with a very novel way to discipline his girls. If they misbehaved, he threatened that tall Betty would come and get them in the night. Now, this fiendish haint was actually an ironing board. They took a pillowcase, they painted a ghoulish face on it and put it on the ironing board. Then they dressed it in a black coat and put on a scary cricket bonnet or a horrible cowboy hat. And then about the time that the daughters were going to sleep peacefully, Grandpa Taylor would slip outside and set tall Betty in the window by their bed, sending them into just shrieks of horror. Now, needless to say, these were very well-behaved girls, by and large. Now, my great aunts loved to tell the story of the night that the entire family, along with the hired hands, had gone to church in Pencil Bluff. The night was pitch black, and they were either on horseback or in the wagon, and along the low road known as Hainted Holler, about half a mile from the house, my grandfather began to look around uncomfortably and murmur that he heard something off in the woods. Covered by darkness, he pulled out his pistol, something every good Christian takes to church, and shot it right up in the air, and then proceeded to grab his chest and fall off his horse. Needless to say, panic ensued until Father Taylor was discovered unharmed and laughing. And according to them, he said he only did it to scare the sin out of him. You know, I share a birthday with my Granny Panny, and she liked to tell me that I was her favorite birthday gift. But as I ponder her legacy, the fortitude, the grit, the faith, and the ability to find something to sing about at the end of each and every day, I realize I may have been her gift, but in truth, she was mine. Now we're about to sing a song that is an old Methodist hymn. As a matter of fact, you will not find it in this hymnal, and you will not find it in the Cokesbury hymnal if you are an old Methodist. You will find it in the very first hymnal before the Cokesbury. It was my grandpa Shortie's favorite hymn, and sometimes he used to request it in church kind of loud in the middle of the service. And I can't remember what it is. Oh, yeah. Okay.
This one called I Want to Know More. While traveling through this world of sorrow, I'm on my way to glory land. I'll not turn back for some tomorrow. My trials here I'll understand. I want to know more. I want to know more about my Jesus. I want to know more. I want to know more about my blessed Lord. I want to know more about that mansion I'm going to receive as my reward. I want to know more. I want to know more about that homeland. I mean to go there someday, somehow. And after I reach that heavenly city, I mean to know more than I know now. He promised when his soul's in bed, I'm coming back, the Lord did say. If on that promise you depended, on wings of love you'll sail away. I want to know more. I want to know more about my Jesus. I want to know more about my Lord. I want to know more about that mansion I'm going to receive as my reward. I want to know more about that homeland. I mean to go there someday, somehow. And after I reach that heavenly city, I mean to know more than I know now. Yeah, after I reach that heavenly city, I mean to know more than I know now.
Well, I think you guys might be able to tell that I've kind of seated the crowd with some family tonight. And so my family has taken up like that whole portion right there of the room, and I am so delighted to have them here. A lot of them have flown in and driven in from a long way away. So thank you, family. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. You boys ready?
I think so.
Okay. All right.
Get down, boys, go back home, back to them girls you love. Treat her right, never wrong, how mountain girls can love.
Well, I'm riding in the night in the high cold wind on the trail of the old lonesome pine. I'm thinking of you and I'm feeling so blue, wondering why I left you behind.
Get down, boys, go back home, back to them girls you love. Treat her right, never wrong, how mountain girls can love.
Well, remember in the night when we strolled down the lane, our hearts were so gay and happy then. You whispered to me as I held you close that you hoped that night would never end.
Get down, boys, go back home, back to them girls you love. Treat her right, never wrong, how mountain girls can love.
Hit it, Johnny.
Well, get down, boys, go back home, back to the girls you love. Treat her right, never wrong, how mountain girls can love.
I said,
How mountain girls can love.
As we say in Cajun country, aye! Our next storyteller is Ron Hughes, who grew up in Arkansas. He spent his 20s living in Chicago, where John Prine claims Ron was his first bass player. Ron was an organic farmer in the Missouri Ozarks in his 30s. Ron, I think that's about ready to be legal now. He moved back to Little Rock in the early 80s, where energy efficiency in houses has been his world. His personal goals are to remain happily married and play more music. Ron is the band leader of the Greasy Greens. We'll have to learn more about that. Let's give a warm Potluck and Poison Ivy welcome to Ron Hughes.
Thank you all. I'm going to try it like this. So, my parents from down around Antoine and Delight, it's not that far from Mount Ida, just a couple of counties over. My grandmother was a Clark. She was one of the daughters of 4 brothers that came from the Tidewater area of North Carolina or Virginia. And they had land holdings there, whatever they had. They sold it all and bought slaves and moved to Arkansas in the 1850, something like that. They almost got the land cleared before Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation and everybody walked down the road. So it was a little bit of a setback. But I subscribe to the theory that the world's divided between people who tell stories and people who shop. And if you're poor in South Arkansas, you don't shop. How poor do they get? I remember my Uncle Lex saying he got so tired
every day he'd take his lard bucket to school, and in that lard bucket was a cold biscuit and a piece of salt pork. He got so tired of cold biscuits and salt pork, he figured somebody was eating better than he was, so he went back in the cloakroom. And everybody had their lard buckets with their lunch all hung on hooks in a row, so he went down the row like this, and he found the heaviest one. He got all excited, swapped lard buckets, and went out back, sat down under the big tree, opened it up, and there were 2 hickory nuts and a rock. So, now, these are true stories from my family. Now, what can I say? So I was born in Prescott, Arkansas. That was the closest hospital to Antoine, where I was living with my mom and her mom while my dad was, at the time, was overseas. She'd been pregnant with me, and she claimed she got tired of being pregnant, so she went out dancing and shook me loose, and I was born the next day. I don't know. Maybe that's why I like to go dancing. I don't know. But my grandparents were Kate, Clark, and Oliver Hankins. Of course, we all called them Daddy Pa and Mama Kate, right? So my grandmother had 10 children, save 9, as they used to say. The first 5 were fathered by Mr. May, who was as well-to-do as you can be well-to-do in Pike County. And they had 5 kids. And then he went out hunting with the boys and reached down from his horse to get his shotgun, and it got snagged on something, and he shot himself dead off his horse, leaving my grandmother a widow with 5 children. Well, that's when my grandfather heard about that, and Daddy Pa came back to where he and Kate had left off before she married this other man. Now, when I say left off, my Aunt Jeanette said that she and her 3 sisters, they were sitting on the front porch the first time they saw my grandfather, Oliver, and Oliver came down the road looking for work wearing a blue serge suit. Now, I don't know what a blue serge suit is exactly. I can kind of imagine. It was probably, but he was looking for work. And so he worked for my grandmother's father for the season, but he didn't let any of the girls fool around with any of the hard hands, as they said. So nothing came of that. But when he moved back, he and Kate got married again. They had 5 more children. Right? So it was kind of a change for for the first kids, because they had felt like they had stepped down in society, because Pike County society, and because Oliver, he was a poor dirt farmer and he was a carpenter, and he's known for a couple things when people say, "I remember your grandfather." One of them was he helped build the Church of Christ in Delight, Arkansas, and he put in the windows. And apparently that was a big deal. And the church is still standing, and the windows go up and down. But the other thing he's remembered for is my mother's younger brother, Buford, the youngest of the kids. Buford went over to the general store in Antoine, and the guy had a lot of watermelons out there on the front porch, and Buford got interested in those watermelons, and the guy told him, said, "Buford, that big one right there, if you can roll it all the way home, you can have it." Well, Buford, he took off rolling that watermelon down the road, and the guy ran, no, I was just kidding, I didn't mean that. Well, Buford went home in tears, telling his dad what happened. So Oliver went back over there to talk to the storekeeper about this, and they got into a fight. And the fight allegedly ended when Oliver pinned the guy to the top of a pot-bellied stove that was hot and bit part of his ear off. And that ended the fight, and Buford rolled the watermelon home. Now, as a kid, I didn't know anything about that. As a little kid growing up, Mama Kate, I just remember that she'd make sugar cookies. They looked giant to me, but when you're a kid. And I remember that, and I remember wringing those chickens' necks for dinner, and then they'd get flopping around, get up against the fence, and couldn't get off. That's burned in my memory. And then one day she went out to get the eggs, and come quick. There's a snake in the hen house. So here Oliver comes in his overalls and a hoe. And I'm following him. Right. Oh, go in the hen house, and there's a big black snake curled up in one of the nests. And Oliver rakes it out onto the ground. You could see that the snake had swallowed 3 eggs already. Oliver chopped off the head, took out his pocket knife, slit the snake open, put the 3 eggs in Mama Kate's egg basket, and went back to the garden and never said a word. I didn't eat eggs for a long time. Mama Kate and I would sit down on the front porch swinging. We'd swing. She'd say, Ronnie, tell Mama Kate what you are. I say, I'm the pride of Mama Kate's heart. And she thought that was the sweetest thing in the world, I guess, because we said it over and over and over, right? I nailed. Then I had an uncle named Ned, my mother's sister's husband. He was a bit of an entrepreneur, and he came to Little Rock, and he bought a drugstore and a bowling alley on Main Street and Little Rock side by side, probably around 12th, 13th and Main Street. And he got my mom to come work for him because he needed some help. She started out working in the drugstore, and then she noticed that Ned was back there filling prescriptions. And Ned didn't know anything about filling prescriptions. It just seemed like, people were wanting to buy them. And so made her a little nervous, so she went to work in the bowling alley. Now, there were a lot of Army people around Little Rock at that time. We had a base here. And a lot of the Army guys would hang out at the bowling alley. And they'd teach me to say things. They'd pick me up and they'd hold me up to their date and say, Ronnie, tell my date what she smells like. And I'd say, she smells like a 9th Street whore. And everybody laughed. And I mean, what do I know, And then I go back to Antoine, and Mama Kate takes me to the Baptist church, and we go outside after church, and we're standing out there on the parking lot, and Ronnie, tell Miss Wingfield what you are. And I said, I am a horse's ass. And that had to have been the most embarrassing moment in her life. And I didn't go back to the bowling alley for a long time after that. Now, one of my mother's other uncles, C.T., Cliff lived out. I'm just telling you stories about things that I've just heard growing up. Cliff went out to Denver, Colorado. So whenever I meet anybody from Colorado, I have to tell them about my Uncle Cliff, who swore after being out there that he came back and he said, well, he felt like the 2 most overrated things in the world were teenage sex and Denver, Colorado. He didn't like it very much. My family's funny. It seems like that whenever we have funerals, we always remember it. There's always a funny story about the funeral. My mom, when she married her second husband, a sweetheart of a man, and he died about a year later. It was kind of tragic, all unexpected, and so forth. And we have the funeral down in Arkadelphia. And when you've got a funeral, somebody's at the house that's in charge of everything. Where do you put the food? Where do you put your coats? All that stuff. Well, that was my Aunt Vida June. Vida June's from Camden. And so she was in charge of that. And so after the funeral was all over, it was just the kids sitting around with Mom. And my brother's soon-to-be wife was with us, Carmen. First time we'd met her, she was from Louisiana, Amite, Louisiana. She told my mother, she says, Tommy, I'll tell you right now, if it hadn't been for Vida June, that funeral would have been a flop. My mama, she thought that was about the funniest thing she'd ever heard. Now, she called my mom Tommy. Tommy, her real name was Rose Burnell, though she said that she was in grammar school before she realized her name was not While You're Up, Tommy. She thought that was what it was for a long time. So my brother passed away, and we'll talk about funerals here for a minute. My brother passed away, and Katrina just happened, so you couldn't have a funeral in Louisiana, so we buried him in Little Rock, where he grew up anyway. And we're all around the kitchen, and the phone rings, and it's the nursing home. It's the funeral home calling, and they're writing the obituary for Dwayne. And they ask all the usual questions, how old he was, where he lived, blah, what he did for work, blah, blah. And then they said, did Dwayne belong to any clubs? And his son, Matt, was in talking to him on the phone. We were on speakerphone, and Matt said, well, the only one I can think of is the Harrod's Casino Rewards Club. And Carmen saying, no, don't say that. But Carmen, that's what people like to read, you know? I mean, that's sweet. The one that may be the most memorable is Buford, my mother's youngest brother. When Buford passed away, we all, after the service, we're all sitting in the church, and everybody started telling Buford's story. He's a very funny guy, and he was everybody's favorite uncles. You know, he'd gather kids around him. He'd say, okay, kids, come here. I'm going to show you a trick. Now, I want you to wind it up. It's a toy, so you wind it up like this. Stand back. All right. You know, and he'd do this. And that's all I have to say about that. So everybody's telling Buford stories, and his wife, Peggy, gets up, and she says, well, you know, that last year, it was just terrible. I didn't sleep a wink. I mean, every time he moved, I woke up. It was just the worst ever. And then one night, he got up, and of course, it woke me up, and he started to the bathroom, and then he stopped at the bathroom door, and he's leaning up against the door, and I said, Buford, are you okay? He said, no, Peggy, I need some help. And she said, what is it? Buford scared me to death. He says, well, I got to go to the bathroom, and the doctor told me not to lift anything heavy. She said, made me sit down, Matt. I couldn't stand it. So I moved back to Little Rock, live with my mom, take care of her the last 4 or 5 years of her life, and we bought a house, and she had one side, I had one side, and had a front porch swing. That's where she usually hung out on a front porch swing and had a cigarette and watching the world go by. One day we had John lived down the street, and he was kind of a grumpy old guy, good guy. And it was Christmas time, and so we decorated the house. And there was somebody that was staying with us, and she was Jewish, and she wasn't not so much in the Christmas decorations, but she had been to Tibet, so she brought back these Tibet prayer flags. And they were strung around the front porch and fluttered in the breeze, and it's pretty cool. And John comes up and sees my mom and says, what you doing, Tommy? Drying your laundry on the front porch? My mom, she says, no, John, those are Tibetan prayer towels, and we're praying for better neighbors. You know? Well, he didn't like those people across the street either. You know? Honestly, there's not a week goes by that I don't think about my mom and one of her stories or some story about my mom, you know, whether it's that or anything else. So I go out and I look and test at houses, new houses. And houses get tighter and tighter these days. And we're not ventilating them. That's one of my drums that I beat. So I was in the house last year, tightest house I've ever tested. I mean, the house was so tight, you open the front door and the toilet would flush. I mean, it was like, this is ridiculous, you know. And I thought about my mother, you know, in a moment like that. And my mom used to say that money was not the most important thing in life, but it was right up there with oxygen. You know? So all that generation of my family, they're all gone. But, you know, we live on in our stories that we tell over and over. And thank you all for letting me share mine tonight. Oh, my song. I have a song to play. Now, see, here it is again. It never fails. This is a song my mother taught me. Yeah. She didn't really, sit me down to teach me. She just liked, they sang it, it was on the radio in the 40s. And somehow she took a liking to it, and so she sang it a lot. And the name of it is, and this is really the name of it, I'm Going Back to Where I Come From, F-R-U-M, and that's how ASCAP has this song, you know. Now imagine, you know, a young person in Antoine, Arkansas. Not a lot of nightlife.
I'm a-going back to where I come from, where the honeysuckle smells so sweet, it darn near makes you sick. I used to think my life was homegrown. Well, I certainly learned my lesson. I can tell you that I used to go down to the station in the morning just to watch that Pullman train come rolling in. And then one day, that great temptation got the best of me and led me to my life of sin. I took my hat and $14, and I went through all the misery of the life that always follows when you're rich and you're hunting romance. Well, I certainly learned my lesson. I can tell you that I met a girl in Kansas City, and she asked me if I thought if I might like to step around, and I said, yep, that's what I'm here for. She told me that she'd take me to the hottest spots in town. She says there's things she'd have to fix up, so she took my $14, and I think there was a mix-up. She's been gone since Thursday morning, and I don't think I'm ever gonna see that gal again. I'm a-going back to where I come from, where the honeysuckle smells so sweet it darn near makes you sick. And when I grow up and I have me a grandson, and I'll tell him about my romance days and watch his eyes bug out, well, chances are he won't believe me, and he'll probably go and do the same darn thing, no doubt. But he can't say I didn't warn him what would happen if he met up with that city gal. Gol darn, I'm a-going back where I come from, where the mockingbirds are singing and the lilac bush. I hope they're still doing that. I don't know.
Thank you, Ron. Appreciate that. That was awesome. Please welcome back to the stage Melissa Toma.
All right. Now, let's get back to that double dog trot cabin in the Big Bend of the Washita River. Now, I have to tell you that that cabin is not much change from when I went there as a child in the summer to gather with our extended family. Now, up here is a picture of that cabin in 1941, and now we're going to see it in 1986. And now we're going to look at it in 2016. Not much change. Now, at that time, my Aunt Chlorine, or Clora for short, was working the farm alongside her husband, Festal, who was one of those hired hands that lived with the Taylors and worked the place under Grandpa Taylor. The original structure had long since been paneled over and updated to its current state. It consisted of 3 rooms side by side, a living room and 2 bedrooms, with a sleeping porch along the back, and a ramshackle dine-in kitchen and sort of a bathroom tacked on for good measure. Now, I would describe staying there as glamping. The front room was stylishly decorated with that iconic sofa set in genuine Naugahyde upholstery, sporting wagon wheel armrests and a saddle applique on the back. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Now, this lovely ensemble faced a big natural rock fireplace, and to set it off nicely, my Uncle Festal Ever the pragmatist had installed wall-to-wall carpet, that is to say, astroturf, in vivid green. Now, the bedrooms were exactly that. They were rooms with a whole bunch of beds in them. And they just held, I believe there were like 4 double beds in each of those rooms. Because you see, my Aunt Clora considered herself very well off, because she had enough beds and sets of sheets and pillows to sleep as many visitors as one could ever want in this lifetime. And the back sleeping porch held the much coveted feather bed, nestled into the corner by a nice window. Now this was the nest that we children always fought over, even though in August, in Arkansas, sleeping wrapped in what amounted to a goose down sleeping bag is not exactly comfortable. Still, we loved it and fought vehemently over it. Now, Clora was the eldest of the Taylor girls, and I can see her clearly manning the stove in a cotton dress, apron, and sensible leather shoes and pantyhose. She had a voice just like river gravel and would often sweep you up onto her knee and tell you stories, and she'd say, "Now, let me tell you about when I was a little boy." She loved to point to the back corner of the front room and proudly proclaim, "That's where I discovered the world," because she had been born in that back corner. Her world really was that 400-acre farm, and by golly, she was queen of it. Uncle Festal was the sweetest, quietest, gentlest man. He didn't say a lot, but he smiled continuously. Now, he had found religion as a young man at one of those tent gospel festivals down in Pencil Bluff, but he had the most amazing story. When he felt the Lord upon his spirit, he broke into spontaneous laughter, and it lasted for over 24 hours. Isn't that crazy? I think that is the most effective evangelistic method I have ever heard of. And he told me once, he said, "Yep, the Lord tickled me to him." Now, even though Clora and Festal were members of the Methodist Church, they attended every possible service in every area of any denomination most every day of the week. Now, almost any evening, you could find Festal with his Bible in his hands, wearing his best white dress shirt and his Sunday overalls, ready for worship. Now, summers at the home place when I was a little boy were magical. You would wake up in the morning to a proper farmer's breakfast: ham, bacon, eggs, and Aunt Clora's world-famous sinkers. These were biscuits that were just as light as air, but they sank just right into your stomach. There were endless things to do. You could fish in the cold river water. You could play with your cousins in the cavernous barn, pick strawberries in the garden. You could dare each other to go into the dark, dank root cellar and come back alive. Or maybe you could saddle up Old Pearl, the family horse, and go for a ride. Now, Old Pearl was an ancient and docile mare whose working days were long behind her and whose only job on this earth was to eat grass and take children for a ride around the house. Now, without any instruction, once saddled, Old Pearl would make a beeline for the front porch, where she would patiently lean against it and wait for 2 or 3 or 4 children to hop on her back. Then she would saunter around the house, taking her own sweet time for 3 rotations. And let me tell you, no amount of giddy-upping would make her go any faster. She would then stop and moved by a mysterious inner timekeeper, would wait for the dismounting and the remounting of a new set of children and then begin the process again all afternoon. But if you didn't hurry, she might make that triple circuit without you, so you had to get on board. Now, as I said before, fishing was a major activity on the farm, and my Granny Panny and Grandpa Shorty were fishing fiends. Those two were very competitive when it came to catching the biggest fish. One time, my Grandpa Shorty hooked a bass so big it broke his line and swam off with his tackle, and he swore. I remember. Not to be outdone, my Granny actually hooked that dadgum fish herself, reeled it in like a pro, plucked Grandpa's tackle from the fish's mouth, and then handed it back to him and said, "Here's your tackle, sweetie." In the late afternoon, with the sun sinking low over the mountains, we were all outfitted with ancient Ked sneakers. My Aunt Clora kept a whole wash tub of old Ked sneakers in a metal pan by the back door. Then we were given a towel and a bit of ivory soap, and we were loaded up into the bed of my Uncle Festal's pickup truck, where we bumped along the dirt road down to the river, where we were instructed to wash possible. Know what I mean? Well, you wash up as far as possible, and you wash down as far as possible, and then you wash possible. Yeah, my brother's doing it right there. Now, all clean and cool, we would sit down for a meal fit for 18 kings and queens with no less than 3 meats, ham, chicken or turkey, and beef, 7 vegetables right from the garden, all delicious, all seasoned with bacon grease and a healthy spoonful of sugar, so basically all dessert, freshly risen pinch rolls, homemade rhubarb jelly, oh yeah, and then cakes and pies of all variety, from fruit to chocolate to coconut cream. There might even be a cookie or two to top it off. Did I mention that I believe that all bears are genetically predisposed to be short, round, and hairy? And when all the women were in that kitchen, stirring and pinching and rolling and carving, my Granny Panny used to look around that room and exclaim, "Ha! We are slinging our tits in the kitchen, girls!" Yeah, that's cooking. That is cooking. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, once you had eaten to the point of needing to undo the top button of your breeches, it was time. Time for the grand finale, the pièce de résistance, the highlight of the weekend. It was time to retire to the front porch, stake a claim on one of the 2 long porch swings hung side by side, or perhaps a metal porch chair that bounced just right, and then begin to make music. My brother might play the guitar, or perhaps his banjo. Someone usually had a ukulele. There was always a washboard and some thimbles. And one lucky person got the gut bucket. An improvised bass fiddle comprised of a turned-over metal bucket rigged with a broom handle and a piece of clothesline string. And it's right over there. That is the family gut bucket. It was an improvised bass. Now, if nothing else, you could always play the spoons. There were plenty of those. Now, it was time to sing. All the old gospel and folk tunes that had rattled around those mountains as long as God could remember. Granny Panny might start us off with a rousing round of Do Lord in a pleasant nasal soprano. Aunt Clara would begin in her low, gravelly voice to sing of Utah Carol and his lost love, Lenore. One of Grandma Panny's children, my dad, Rex, or his sister, Mert, or his brother, Skeeter Bill, would lighten the atmosphere by inviting us to put our chewing gum on the fence post and join the Baptist Sunday School. You ever heard of that? Young folks, old folks, everybody come bum. Join the Baptist Sunday School, make yourself to home. Please check your chewing gum and razors at the door, and you'll hear some Bible stories like you never heard before. Now, this is where I learned to sing. It's where I learned to sing harmony. You see, you were expected to choose a part and sing it. Tenor, bass, alto, descant, didn't really matter. It was your contribution to the chorus. Never mind that sometimes I am really not sure anybody was singing the melody. It just didn't matter. Music. Mountain music is my first memory, just like my Granny Panny. And making music at every single family gathering was and is the most natural world in the thing. Oh, did I say that? World in the thing. I felt it deeply, so it doesn't matter. It is the most natural thing in the world for my family. If you drove over to Great Aunt Winnie and Uncle Will's house for Sunday lunch, you could not go home until you'd sung a few rounds of I'll Fly Away. Whatever the occasion, holidays, weddings, and yes, funerals, there was always time for making music. In this family, we'll sing you into this world, and by golly, we will sing you out of it. Now, as the night would grow dark and cool, and the Milky Way would begin to emerge from that cobalt blue sky, we would sing through the catalog of classic folk and gospel tunes. The creak of the porch swing kept time to the music just right. You might even catch the spirit and find yourself doing an impromptu jig in the front yard, stomping the wet grass in your bare feet with lightning bugs for your dance partners. You know, nothing sounds sweeter than that high lonesome, that flat pitch perfect tone tightening into the clearest harmony, reflecting the sweat, the sweetness, the grief, and the glory of life in those old hills. And nothing binds like the golden thread of music, shared across a front porch and across generations. This has been the greatest gift my mountain family has given to me, and I have come to understand it might just be the greatest gift I can pass along. Now, I was the youngest, and so my nights almost always ended in the arms of some great aunt or uncle who would pick me up where I'd begun nodding off in the swing and put me to bed under the window on the sleeping porch. Heaven for me is the distant sound of laughter and music wafting on a gentle breeze across my dozing body, resting on a bed of softest downy feathers, angel wings, and I am home. One glad morning, when this life is o'er, I'll fly away to a home on God's celestial shore. I'll fly away.
hallelujah, by and by I'll fly away. Just a few more weary days and then I'll fly away to a home where joy will never end. I'll fly away. I'll fly away, oh glory. I'll fly away. When I die, hallelujah, by and by I'll fly away. I got a home in glory land that outshines the sun. I got a home in glory land that outshines the sun. Sing with us. I got a home in glory land that outshines the sun. Look away beyond the blue. Do Lord, oh do Lord, oh do remember me. Do Lord, oh do Lord, oh do remember me. Do Lord, oh do Lord, oh do remember me. Look away beyond the blue. I saw the light, I saw the light. No more darkness, no more night. Now I'm so happy, no sorrow inside. Praise the Lord, I saw the light.
I was standing by my window on a cold and cloudy day when I saw that hearse come rolling to carry my mama away. Will the circle be unbroken? Oh, by and by, Lord, by and by. There's a better home awaiting in the sky, Lord, in the sky.
Well, I told that undertaker, please drive slow. For this body you are hauling, Lord, I hate to see her go.
Will the circle be unbroken? By and by, Lord, by and by. There's a better home awaiting in the sky, Lord, in the sky.
Well, I followed close behind her. Wish my mother she was gone, and we could not hide our sorrow when they laid her in the grave.
Will the circle be unbroken? By and by, Lord, by and by. There's a better home awaiting in the sky, Lord, in the sky. Hey, Johnny. Well, I went home. My home was lonesome. Oh, a house so sad and long. All my brothers, sisters cried.
when woman tempted man down in Paradise's hall. This woman tempted me and took me for a ride. Like a weary fox, I need a place to hide. She walks through the corn leading down to the river. Her hair shone like gold in the hot morning sun. She took all the love that a poor boy could give her and left me to die like a fox on the run. Like a fox on the run. Well, come take a glass of wine and fortify your soul. We'll talk about the world and the friends we used to know. I'll illustrate a girl, she put me on the floor. The game is nearly over and the hounds are at my door. She walks through the corn leading down to the river. Her hair shone like gold in the hot morning sun. She took all the love that a poor boy could give her and left me to die like a fox on the run. Like a fox, like a fox, like a fox on the run.
What do they say? You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here.